It has nothing to do with bees. The Wicker Man, of course, is what I'm referring to. The Wicker Man, one of the great horror movies of the 1970s, was released 50 years ago this year. So during this 50th anniversary, quite a lot is going on to celebrate The Wicker Man and its legacy. For one thing, there's a new book out by John Walsh, which I'm very much looking forward to reading, which is telling the story behind The Wicker Man. But one of the things that you will quickly discover if you want to do some research about the movie The Wicker Man is that very little is available. And what is available is hard to find, and what you do find is going to be very expensive. So what are you to do when you want to read about the movie? Well, there's John Walsh's book. There's another option too, and of course it's one of the reasons I'm making this video, and that has to do with a series called The Devil's Advocates. These are some of the books in the series. As you can see, these are fairly short books that deal with one movie per book. And a new volume of this series is also coming out about the Wicker Man. It will be released in September, and it happens to be a book that I wrote. So I hope that you will stick around to find out a little bit more about the Wicker Man here. And so when September rolls around, you'll have at least one more option, and that will be the book that I have written. So why should you bother reading my book? Well, let me tell you a little bit about holiday horror. You see, The Wicker Man is holiday horror, and that's a genre, better yet, a subgenre that hasn't been explored very much. Now, we assign genres to things like books and movies and such because we need to know what is like the things that we already like. So if you read horror novels, you know what a horror novel is, but maybe there's a certain kind that you like, gothic horror or body horror or whatever. And so you want to know what others are like this so that you can find something similar to what you've already had. Well, The Wicker Man is normally understood as an example of folk horror, and that's absolutely true. It is an example of folk horror. It's one of the original 3 folk horror movies. There were 3 of them produced right around the same time period from about 1968 through about 1973. And The Wicker Man is one of those, but it's also a book about holiday horror. Now, what is holiday horror? I keep on using that phrase. Well, holiday horror means that there's something about the holiday that the movie is based on that generates fear. Now, if you're like most people, you probably think holidays, they're fun, they're relaxing, they're enjoyable. Yes, they are. But there are elements of fear in holidays. Now, we can see it in subtle ways in everyday life when we try to get together with family and friends, and you've got all the details to work out, and what if something goes wrong? Well, holiday horror goes a little bit deeper than that. There's something really, really going wrong. So that is the generation of the fear in the movie. Now, I know that you may, if you're watching this video, I hope you've already seen The Wicker Man. If you haven't, put it on pause and go watch it, because it makes a lot more sense if you see it to hear what I'm talking about here. But what is the holiday horror in Wicker Man? Well, if you have seen it, you know that it is about May Day. I'm posting this video just before May Day. Of course, it'll be on YouTube after that as well. But May Day is a holiday we don't celebrate much anymore, at least not in Western culture. And so that's one of the reasons that it makes such an impact in this movie. It's unfamiliar. It's a holiday that most viewers are not really terribly aware of or know anything about. So what is May Day? Well, May Day is a holiday that is celebrated among the Celts. And we'll talk about the Celts more in just a minute. The reason that the Celts celebrated May Day is that they had a set of 4 holidays that divided the year into 4 parts. Now, you're probably familiar with this from being in the Western world, especially if you're in the Western world, I suppose. You're probably familiar with this from the idea of the summer solstice, the winter solstice, in the spring, and autumnal equinoxes. Those are 4 points in the year that we measure astronomically, and we use it to divide our year into the 4 seasons of winter, spring, summer, and fall. We know that winter begins at the winter solstice. That's our way of thinking. Well, the Celts actually thought about this somewhat differently. They thought that the seasons began about halfway between each of these solstices and equinoxes. They knew about them. They could measure them, of course, but they thought that the holidays, or not the holidays, but the seasons shifted in the middle. And so these are sometimes called cross-quarter days because they're part of the quarter days would be the solstices and equinoxes. The cross quarter days would be the days that fall in between. So roughly between each of the solstices and equinoxes, there is a holiday that was celebrated by the Celts. One of them is on May 1st or thereabouts, May Day, known as Beltane in the original languages, or at least among those who speak Gaelic languages, they recognize what Beltane is. Now, Beltane falls about May 1st, and that is roughly midway between the spring equinox and the next major holiday, which would be midsummer. Now, most of us are probably thinking that midsummer, which actually falls around June 1st, is a bit of a misnomer because midsummer is not the middle of the summer. It's actually near the beginning of the summer. Beltane falls between two holidays. One is the spring equinox, which just occurred a few weeks ago, and midsummer. Now, to our way of thinking, midsummer is a rather strange name for a holiday that falls on June 21st. It's the first day of summer, right? For our way of thinking, that's when summer begins. But in ancient times, it was really considered to be more the beginning or the middle of summer because summer began earlier. The seasons shift a little bit, and part of this has to do with the fact that we're talking about something that happened in the British Isles. The British Isles are situated such that the Gulf Stream waters, like in the song, the Gulf Stream waters keep it fairly warm during winter, which means the seasons tend to come a little bit sooner, or at least that's the way that the Celts who lived in Ireland thought about it. The seasons started a bit sooner. So, for example, they thought of spring as beginning in February. Now, most of us would think February is far too cold. There's still snow on the ground. It's not the beginning of spring. But that's a perspective based on where we live and our experience of the weather and such. And so this calendar of the year, or this wheel of the year, set up so that we have 8 holidays, and it was adopted by modern religions such as Wicca. Wicca is a religion that was put together in the 1800s based on some ancient materials, but also on quite a bit of imagination on the part of modern people. And they thought this idea was that these holidays would be celebrated by Celts in the ancient times, and there were four cross-quarter days, and there were 4 quarter days, and so they had a nice wheel of the year with 8 different spokes on it that gave us the holidays. So in that way of thinking, midsummer falls on June 21st and not on the middle of the summer, which we'd say is somewhere in the middle of July, to our way of thinking, or late July even. So May Day. May Day, Beltane, falls toward the beginning of May. And the story in the movie has to do with a Christian policeman who is lured to a Scottish island called Summer Isle. It's remote. He goes there by himself. And he's lured there by the belief that a young girl has gone missing. And as the movie unfolds, this police sergeant starts to think that maybe the girl is not dead but still alive, and that she is being saved as a sacrifice for this pagan holiday, because on the island he discovers that everybody believes in Celtic religion. They are not Christian like he is. And so this movie turns out to be a real clash between religions. And again, that drives the fear for holiday horror, because holiday horror often deals with the things that are going on with religions and why they don't agree with each other or get along with each other. And so this Christian policeman has to deal with a bunch of people that have a completely different way of looking at the world, and that leads to holiday horror. Well, I don't want to say too much about it, otherwise you won't have a chance or won't have a reason to read my book. So I'll let you think about that a little bit, and if you are so inclined or want to learn more about it, I would encourage you to take a look. My book is going to be called simply The Wicker Man. All the books in this series are simply named after the movie. And it will be published by Auteur Press, and it will be available in September. So until then, I hope that you'll have safe holidays and nothing with holiday horror in it. And I also hope that you won't start smoking, or if you do, that you'll stop. This is just a prop. Because remember, the Wicker Man ends up showing us the dangers of playing with fire. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please click the links below to subscribe or to like or to share, and I will be presenting more horror movie videos in the coming days.